Welcome to the Elokus channel. This is class number 2 in the third discourse of B'Shoshe Ekdimu, 5672. The Maamor is Vayichan Shom Yisroel Neged Ahor. This is class number 2 in that discourse. These classes now, this first couple of classes of this discourse is Loschus Mendi, whoever Mendi is again, the anonymous Mendi. Shem Shebenchiu. Okay, we're ready to go. We are holding over here in the beginning of chapter 9 of the discourse. So we began exploring. This was on Sunday. We have a little break since then because we have Tisha B'Av and so on. So let's really get back into it. We were in this Maamor, in this discourse, and then in this chapter, he further elucidates this that he had begun explaining in the previous chapter, the difference between the lights and the vessels. How the lights are very much connected and reflective of the infinite. They kind of portray and continue on to express the infinite. And therefore, we can say about them, as he's going to conclude, that they are not enough. They aren't something new. They are just a revelation of a hidden potential versus the vessels, which the vessels are not non-expressive. It's kind of a breakaway from the infinite, and it introduces a limitation, boundaries, definition, which is more unreflective of the infinite, and it brings to the table, it brings to the forefront something new, and to that degree, it's creation-like, which is something new, and those are the vessels of Atzilus, and in that sense, Atzilus would then be Ein Aroich, would be completely inconsequential and incomparative to the infinite, because a creation to the creator is absolutely nothing. And Atzilus has both these features because Atzilus needs to work as the go-between between the infinite and the creation. So Atzilus contains these contrast, the lights and the vessels. And over here in this chapter, he's going to further explain that by showing us the relationship of the actual evolution or coming into being of the light and the nature and the vessels. Meaning not only that in the last chapter we learned that the light is a product of the kav, which is a product, we might say, or not really a product, but like a derivative of the Or Ein Sof, of the infinite light, and the what's called again, the kelim, the vessels, they are a product of the tzimtzum, or more specifically, the rishimu. The trace, which are all powers that conceal, obscure, and disconnect from the Or Ein Sof. That was what we learned. So we traced the lights to its source, and we traced the vessels to its source. And that was an explanation. Once we identified the source of the lights and the source of the vessels, it made sense why the lights are so much greater than the vessels in this as we discussed. Now he's going to take it even further and explain the manner in which the lights of Atzilus evolve from the Kav and from the Or Ein Sof is different than the manner in which the kelim, the vessels of Atzilus, are produced by its divine sources. In other words, the difference is not only what the source is, but also how they are related to the source, how they come into being. The oiros, the lights, are going to come into existence. The way the lights are produced is in a manner of continuity, in a manner of connection, in a manner of revelation. The manner in which the vessels stem from their divine source ultimately back into God is in a manner of disconnect, in a manner of distance. The way it's produced is in a manner that it's far from its source. and therefore unreflective of its source. And this obviously makes a huge difference, because that's why the fact that the vessels are going to be so non-infinite and so non-godlike, although they're godly, it's because of the idea that they're produced in a manner in which kind of Hashem is kind of remorphosizing himself in as a contracted force, or as a limited force, by kind of, obviously it's a self-imposed disconnect, but he's bringing about himself, because the vessels are also him, but in a way that it is seemingly separated from his infinity. That's the idea. It's gonna become clearer today as we're gonna learn. So in class number 1, we discussed we're focusing on the vessels now. Soon in chapter I think what is it? In chapter 11. Okay, we're starting now chapter 9. In chapter 11, in the same discourse, but in chapter 11, he's going to address the lights and show the connectivity and the attachment of the lights. But in this class, right now, in the next 2 chapters, which is going to be the subject of the next few classes, he's going to address the vessels and their disconnection. So when he is going to demonstrate how the vessels are produced in a manner of disconnect from its source, he's going to show it to us regarding 3 sources of the vessels. First of all, the relationship of the vessels to the general Or Ein Sof. Because ultimately everything comes from the Or Ein Sof. Everything comes from God. So, but the manner in which the vessels come from the Or Ein Sof is through the mediation, if you might say, through the interruption of the tzimtzum. And as we discussed already in last class, that tzimtzum is primarily necessary for the vessels, not so much for the oiros, not so much for the lights. It's primarily for the vessels, which means that the greater effect of the tzimtzum was to produce the vessels, which is what's tzimtzum? Blocking and obscuring. So if you ask, do the kalim, do the vessels have a relationship with the Or Ein Sof? Obviously, if not for the Or Ein Sof, they couldn't be. Yes, but the manner in which they come about is through a complete, remember as we discussed in the last class, a tzimtzum. What kind of tzimtzum? A tzimtzum that completely blocks. It dims the light. It takes away the Or Ein Sof totally, which means we move away from the Or Ein Sof in order to produce the kalim. So that's regarding the kalim, the vessels, and their relationship with the Or Ein Sof. Contrast that with the light for a moment, with the oiros. Although over here there was also a tzimtzum that blocks the infinite light completely before these lights are produced, but there is a connector. What's the connector? There is a bridge that bridges, and that is the kav. Because the kav comes from the Or Ein Sof that's before the tzimtzum and kind of breaks through and burrows a hole, so to speak, in the laser beaming, blasting through the darkness. So reintroducing the Or Ein Sof after the tzimtzum into the space of the tzimtzum. So the oiros will then be reconnected, not disconnected. So there you can see already the contrast over here. Now, there is, however, in addition to the question whether, the relationship of the kalim to the Or Ein Sof, how about the relationship to the kalim to something that is not impacted by the tzimtzum, because quite on the contrary, the tzimtzum brought this into focus. The tzimtzum brought this power that we're going to mention in a moment into noticeability, into a presence. What's that? That's the Rishima. Remember we discussed that the Rishima was the hidden potential of God to affect in the finite. And that hidden potential of God is not seen in the overall revelation of the infinite. So when the tzimtzum goes and erase the light, like you erase whatever it is that you painting or whatever writing you wrote on a paper, you erase it. So by removing that, suddenly you notice these tiny traces, and that's the rishimu that's left over. And we said in in the earlier classes in last chapter, in last Maamor, and also the last chapter in chapter 8, that the Kalim are a product. They come from the Rishimu, from these traces. Now, on that you can't say, "Ooh, the Rishimu." Now, what's the Rishimu? The Rishimu's traces of Ein Sof. So at least, although it's crumbs of the Ein Sof, but it's still Ein Sof, if you might say. And now that we say that, wow, that the Rishimu is the source, that's the bedrock, or that's the space, like he called it earlier, from which the Kalim are produced, which the Kalim are also meant to produce that concept of Makayim, of space. So it's like this space evolves from the space of these dots, or these traces of the Ein Sof. And you can't say over here that Tzimtzum now comes and disconnects, because the Rishimu only is born, at least to our noticeability, after the Tzimtzum is over. So the Tzimtzum is over already, and what's left is the Rishimu, and from the Rishimu is produced the Kalim. So now you might therefore argue that at least, yes, to the Ein Sof, the Kalim are disconnected, but to the Rishimu, or like it's sometimes referred to as Oisius Rishimu, the letters of the Rishimu, which are letters of the Ein Sof, the Kalim are directly linked, and therefore even the Kalim should reflect the Ein Sof. For that, he is now beginning to explain why it's not that way. And that's going to be our main occupation in today's class. Now, there's going to be a third thing. I'm putting it out here at the beginning so that we follow. I like to give you a little bit of a snapshot of where the Maamor is going, so that it already conditions our minds to be able to, it's like it helps sometimes when you're driving and you look ahead on the map where what exactly, even if you're another 70 miles on this freeway, but at least if you're going to make a right or a left afterwards, it helps kind of condition the driving, the smoothness of the drive. So let's try to create that here as well. After he's going to complete this thought, he's going to address one more question. And that is that when we discussed how the Kalim come into existence, we said what's primary there is the Tzimtzum and the letters of the Rishimu, but there is also one more thing, and the power of the Rishimu would be very, very, very unpronounced, unknown, hidden, and produced. The Kav comes in, and the Kav produces. Kav is a revelation of the productive power of God. It's only that but remember what we learned last time. If Kav would be just coming directly, it would just reveal in the power of God to be infinite. Since the Kav is, in order for it to produce a finite effect, it's being funneled through the Rishimu. It's like light being funneled through a Rishimu, and therefore its effect is going to be in a very specified, designated way. Let me use a quick example now. If you have light shining, plain light, and in the room, so there's plain pure light, that's where the light goes. But if you take in front of a beaming projector of light, you put a paper, a black, let's say you put a black cardboard sheet of cardboard, it will block the whole light on the screen. What happens if you cut out in the cardboard the letter A, B, C, or Aleph, Beis, Gimel, and now the light is shining through? So what's going to happen? If you're looking at the screen on the wall, or whatever it is, the screen that's there, what are you going to see? You're going to see a light, but what kind of light? You're going to see the letter Aleph, the letter Beis, the letter Gimel. And even though the light itself is not an Aleph, Beis, or a Gimel, the light itself is a pure, undefined light. But since it's being funneled through a Rishimu, a letters, a trace of a particular, something like that is the idea of how the Kalim now are produced. So if this is the case, we still have to explain, since the Kav is a power that is openly connected to the Ein Sof, to the infinite light, And the Kalim, they too are brought about through the Kav. Although the Kav is not their primary developer, their main developer are the letters of the Rishimo, like we discussed earlier. But since they still brush with the Kav, they still come into contact with the Kav, shouldn't that link them up? Maybe the Kav is only the Shatchen. Maybe the Kav is only the what do you call when you have a person in the middle, the broker. But after all, if you're talking to the broker, you're still connecting to the broker. And since the Kav is linked up with the Or Ein Sof, shouldn't that instill notes? Shouldn't that put fingerprints, if you might say, of the Or Ein Sof into the Kalim? And thereby not allow the Kalim to be real Kalim. That he's going to address in the next point, that even the Kav's interaction with the Kalim is through a system of brokenness. So on all levels, on every bit of Or Ein Sof, the communication between the Or Ein Sof is completely cut off in order to produce the Kalim. Regarding the Or Ein Sof itself, we have the Tzimtzum. Regarding the Rishimu, we're going to say that we're going to learn in today's class which the Rishimu at least are traces of the Or Ein Sof, and therefore by the Kalim being a product of the Rishimu, that itself should connect it to the Or Ein Sof. We're going to see in today's class why that does not work. And finally, in tomorrow's class, if we get there tomorrow, we're going to understand how the Kav itself, in its interaction, in its communication between the Or Ein Sof and the Kalim, gets broken, gets shut down. And that's why, not shut down, gets interrupted, if you might say. And for that reason, it creates enough static that the product loses all all frequency or all ability to be able to hear and remember, if you might say, the Or Ein Sof. And for that reason, what is produced is Kalim, which are truly limited and non-reflective of the Or Ein Sof. Okay, so now we're going to address the concept that why the relationship of the Kalim to the Rishimu is in a way of disconnect. So we're going back. This is just literally 4 lines into chapter 9. We learned a little bit over here, but we're going to go back here. They're coming into being Misharshan Maharishimu, from their source of the Rishimu of the trays, who bederech ein aroich, is in a manner of that the Kalim are considered inconsequential and nothing to the Rishimu itself. So therefore, they have no relationship with it. It's like something totally new. Why? Sharei, and the reason for that is Rishimu hu b'chinas koyach ne'elam. Rishimu is, the concept of Rishimu is that it's a concealed power. Shazau hafresh, this is the difference between a kav l'Rishimu. There's a difference between kav and Rishimu, between the thread, the light, the line, and the Rishimu. Both of them, kav and Rishimu, are both leftovers, if you might say, from the Or Ein Sof. The Rishimu was the leftover traces that the Tzimtzum did not erase, if you might say. And the Kav is a reintroduction, so to speak, of the Or Ein Sof. So they're both, we could say they're both of the Or Ein Sof. But what's the difference? Kav is a power of revelation, and Rishimu is a power that is ne'elam. It's a hidden, concealed thing. Although it's Or Ein Sof, but it's a hiddenness of the Or Ein Sof, not a revelation of the Or Ein Sof. The Kav is, we're going to hopefully get a better understanding as we read. The Kav hu b'chinas gilui, Kav is revelation, v'Rishimu hu b'chinas helam, and Rishimu is the idea of concealment. The imkain, and if so, and therefore, we're going to come back to this line in a moment. I want to just complete the thought. The imkain, and if so, this that is drawn from the Rishimu, the coming into being of the Kalim, Since Rishimu itself, for itself, in itself, is all, it's not expressive, it's not showing off, it's hiding, it's concealing itself, it's all about hiddenness and non-revelation. Therefore, when it produces something, it produces whatever it produces, it does so anonymously, where the source is not revealed, where the Rishimu's contribution to whatever is going to be made is going to be hidden from the whatever is being made. It donates anonymously. Listen, we can tell this. Anytime you have a shul, an organization, a place, a community, there are people who are loud and expressive, and they do a whole lot of good things. And we need such people, or else not too many things move. But people that love revelation, they take center stage. They reveal. What they do is openly, sometimes ostentatiously, and sometimes not. Sometimes arrogantly, but even if it's not arrogantly, it's just there is a presence of them, and their name is always on everything they do, and it's obvious, it's revealed. That's one type of a person. They are about expression. They love expression. And then there are people who are by nature and by very, very silent, inconspicuous, hidden, under the radar. And usually when the two people donate, it's a difference. This person will always donate and wants his or her name on it, and the other person wants always anonymity. And that is because this is kind of the idea that he's saying. Rishimu is, I'm going to use strong language. Kav is God showing off. God lifting. Kav is Hashem flexing his muscles. See, take a look at my muscles. Why? Because what's Kav? Kav is an expression the truth is the ultimate revelation of God is the Or Ein Sof. That's where God is saying, hey, take a look how cool I am. I'm infinite. Anything. He's revealing his infinity. Now, but there's no one to reveal it to, right? There's no, because it's only him. Because if he's infinite, he's saying there's no one to reveal it to. So for that, he has to hide. But once he finally has an audience, he finally has in that space a little audience, he now reintroduces himself and flexes his muscles and pounds on his chest and says, here I am. Look, I am infinite. I'm great. So it's a because the Kav is all about revealing God, revealing his infinity, revealing the Or Ein Sof. What's Rishimu? Rishimu is, as we said before, the power for God to limit. The power of limiting, meaning the power of him not revealing his power. The power of him to be able to constrain his power. Now, the truth is, his power to constrain and to limit his power is the ultimate testament to his true limitlessness. So really, you can argue that the power of the Rishimu is like the ultimate revelation of how infinite he is, that he can even be limit. He can even create tiny, insignificant, small nothings. That's how he doesn't have to express himself. That's true. But that's only when you see the Rishimu as it is one completely, when it's in the Or Ein Sof as part of the Or Ein Sof. But when the Rishimu starts to become when the only thing that's being revealed is Rishimu, not as part of the Or Ein Sof, but it's Rishimu. So what are you saying? If God is to show off, let's say, only through Rishimu, only through his restraint, limited light, what kind of impression would we have of God? What would we know of him? We would think of him that he's very weak and very tiny and very small, because all of his omnipotence and his infinity and his boundlessness is not. Now that we know that his power to limit is another feature of his infinity, then it's super cool because his limitation, his power to limit is of his infinity. But when you take the power of the limitation itself, it's not at all a revelation of him. It's an obscuring of him. He's hiding in the Rishimu. He's not revealing himself in the Rishimu. Let alone the fact that the Rishimu itself, while it was in the Or Ein Sof, you didn't even notice it. Because the power to limit is lost. And when he was revealing, it was lost. You didn't even see it. And now when he's concealing the Or Ein Sof and only leaving the power of his finiteness, not from within, not as part of his infinity, but as just a trace, then what kind of, he's no more a big, infinite, boundless God. He's a power, a very limited power. So it's everything about Rishimu then, therefore, is Nelam, is concealment, is hiddenness. And for that reason, when Rishimu gives off and produces, its production and its effects are always without advertisement, meaning not connected to it. It produces, like I was saying last class, when the Mossad does something, it's like they don't have any fingerprints to it. It like happens. Everybody know. See, now that we know already their way means of operation, you can say, oh, they were involved, but you really can't trace it. You can't find a link. How, what, where, and when, no one knows. So this is the power of Rishimu. It affects not through connection, it connects through distance. We're soon going to see, he doesn't bring it here. I looked this up as I was preparing over here, Baruch Hashem, for the new Ayin Beis that have really good footnotes. So from Tafresh Samach Beis, I looked up over there and he explains the line, as we get later, is that there's two ways in which a source of light a fire that gives off light, can transmit. One way it transmits its rays, the light, like the sun rays. Another way is through a spark, a little nitzutz, a little spark of fire that goes from the big flame, and goes, like when you have a big blaze burning, there's a bunch of sparks that go off. The difference between them is the spark is of the fire, but it gets completely disconnected from the fire. It separates itself from the fire as if it's its own entity. The rays of light are connected to their source, and they're a reflection. Although they don't have so much even the essence of the fire, they're just a light, but they're a light that is in a state of dveikus, of attachment to its source. So Kav is a light from the Or Ein Sof. Rishimu itself is like a spark of the Or Ein Sof, and when the Rishimu produces Kalim, actually in Samach Beis, he's not talking about the Rishimu itself, but he's talking about when the Rishimu produces Kalim, it produces it like it throws a spark of it, which becomes separated and disconnected from it, far away, and you just see the spark, you don't know where it came from. That's the idea. So let's read it inside. Okay. This that's drawn at Rishimu Savas HaKelim, Harei ze gam kein b'bchinas Elam, is in a state of concealment. Harei ein ze hisavu sheb'bchinas kiruv. It's not a bringing into existence in a manner of closeness, but in a manner of distance. And the idea is, I wanted to learn so much the next piece, but I think to clarify and to explain, we're going to leave this class, Be'ezus Hashem, not to go over the half an hour. We're going to leave this class. He's going to explain better the concept of the hiddenness of the Rishimu and how you see that its effect into the Kalim is in a way of anonymity and separation. Okay. Meanwhile, let Mashiach be here now.